Good evening and welcome to DNI Stream. It is Thursday, 7 p.m. British summertime now, because our clocks have changed. Here on twitch.tv/DNI Stream. Welcome to Documentation Not Included, episode 2.7. We did have a different schedule on today. We had a guest, but unfortunately they couldn't make it. And as people may notice, Josie isn't here either. But I do have a guest. I have a guest that we had on the show previously. But he's decided to join us today. Hello, Patryk. How are you doing?
Hello. I came back from the depths unknown of the long-forgotten land of having no internet. There is a grand story behind it, but before that, let's get on going with the rest of the show.
Yeah, so as you can see, you said, unfortunately, Josie's not here today, so and our guest could not make it. But we are still going to do an icebreaker. We are still going to run the show and hopefully talk about a little bit more in depth about the topic that Patryk set last week, but couldn't make it. So we're talking about big versus small companies, part 2. But before we go on, Patryk, yeah. I believe you have got us an icebreaker.
Yeah, among many gifts that I brought from the land of no internet, icebreaker is one of them, and today is as follows. What is your most hated color, but viscerally hating it?
Hated? I mean, this is an arty question, though, isn't it? This is for artists, really, because I know. I've got a good friend. We haven't had on this show, but I've done podcasts with him previously called Lou, who has very strong opinions about colours and specific colour palettes and. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a fan of like purples and blues. That kind corporate blue.
Yeah. That's
probably my least favourite colour.
I see. The one that I hate is the neon bright pink, and that's not because of any real life or aesthetic reasons. It's because when you fuck up your shaders, when you program, they're gonna be, at least in Unity, bright fucking pink, and I hate it with passion.
Yes, and so straight back into the swearing as well. Absolutely,
I mean,
we've missed you, Patryk.
I had to. I was thinking about it before the show. When should my first F-bomb be dropped? And I was weighing the options between like waiting a bit and like springing it up on you, or just dropping it from the start. But I haven't managed to be here last week, so I had to start with a fanfare.
Yes, well, so we've had a few people in chat say something. Avina, hello Avina, and Tultepe or Tul. Oh, I'm gonna give up trying to actually say your name. I'm sorry. We have Avina who said, "I dislike mustard yellow the most." I can kind of get that. It's the combination of colours. Like mustard yellow sometimes works nicely with purple. If you're putting a website together, so I'm actually in the middle of doing exactly that, using kind of a mustardy yellow with a purple in just a simple site. No one else is. Well, I'll show you it later on, and you can give me your opinion, Patryk.
How could this possibly be looking right? A mustard yellow, especially like the dirty, like this sort of vomit color yellow, like
It's not quite that. It's not quite that dirty, but yeah, it's a. I don't know. It's a yellow anyway. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I'm really struggling with that, but I totally agree with the pink side of things. I'm not a fan of hot pink. That.
Yeah.
It was really quite popular a while ago on the internet. There was a lot of people. There was HTMLboilerplate.com created a default template that if you highlighted text when you use their template, the CSS would highlight it in hot pink. And it was people forgot to change it a lot of the time, and it's maybe not as popular now. But right, okay. So yes, let's move on to our show. Our main subject today is big versus small companies. I said we did talk about this in quite a lot of depth last week, but Patryk set the topic because you've moved from a small company environment into a big corporate environment that you're not used to at all. So why did you want to talk about that?
And the first thing is that I finally have a voice. I no longer am mute member of a chat screaming into the void, so that's great. But Yeah, in terms of them, like, why did I do the move? Mostly because I wanted some stability in my life. I've been freelancing since start of my career, really. I've been freelancing and working on small projects. And, all of them, every single time when you undergo a freelance job, or especially when you're a partner in a small company, startup especially, it's a gamble. Like, either it can explode amazingly and set you up for the rest of your life, or it can explode horribly, and in best case scenario you don't lose anything, and in worst case scenario you fuck up your life so hard it takes 2 years to get back out of that shithole, which kind of happened to me. So when my previous company, Amber Eye Studios, closed, my primary goal and one of the first questions that I had to the recruiters and to the people I've been interviewing with was, how old is your company, how stable it is, how many people you are, how many people you hired or fired last year? Because I needed to know the trajectory. And the company I've landed with, which is Scopely, most might not know it. It's a mobile game publisher, one of the biggest actually. It's like, you have the King, and you have like the Angry Birds guys, and then
Rovio.
You have like Rovio, and then you have some other one, and then you have Scopely.
Zynga.
Yeah, you have Zynga also. Yeah, and I think like Scopely is like after those.
Right, I've heard of them before, but I again wasn't aware they were a mobile development.
They do only mobiles, and they do licensed games. So they work with like big publishers like Disney. Or wait, I don't know if they work with. I don't know if they have Disney. Warner Bros. For sure though. They've released like a Looney Tunes game and WWE stuff like that. So it's a pretty serious business they have going on.
Yeah, lots of licensing model. They take on license from big companies and create games for them under kind of their supervision, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and it's like the advantage of being so in game development, you often have to be picky in terms of what kind of job you're undertaking, because even if you're employed, if you release a shit game, it's kind of black mark on your resume, it's especially important for game designers, because you design the game. If the game is shit, you're directly responsible for it. For technical artists, it's slightly easier because I don't design the game, I don't create the assets, at least not often. Only when it's like, when it's really required and everyone's busy. I mostly just optimize the game and do special effects and do fancy shit.
You're only as good as your last project, no matter kind of who you are, especially if you're a freelancer or you're self-employed. Then essentially, I'm hired based on what I did last most of the time. It's annoying, but it happens,
I think this is for everyone, because like I hadn't had so many options before I had official title technical artist on LinkedIn. Even though I was doing technical artist things before, I never was hired specifically as a technical artist. But the minute I put that into my field in LinkedIn, I was there was like avalanche of recruiters in my messages.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I said we've talked about job titles a hell of a lot on this show, and I'm not. I think my official job title for one of my clients at the moment is systems engineer, but it's actually a solution architect role, and I'm actually doing research and development, but I'm not even doing so. I'm doing it's really job title means nothing. It really does. Yeah. I'm doing this very similar stuff that I've done in the past, but a lot of different stuff as well. It changes constantly.
It doesn't matter in terms of like what you're doing, but it definitely matters in terms of like how other people see you after you finish the job.
Yeah. So so let's stick on to the topic of big versus small then. So why did you make this jump from? Did you make it consciously, or did you want to?
It was partially out of necessity because my company closed. Like I couldn't work with Amber Eye anymore because it was dead.
But did you not feel yourself drawn to the smaller company because that's what you knew? Did you not find it? Didn't you have a little bit of trepidation because you?
I mean, it was definitely part of it. But even before I joined Amber Eye, I was already in the mindset that I want some breather. I want few years of stability. But this is what I had, and it was actually really exciting projects. And like, hey, to hell with that, let's do this. And it was a good decision because that put me forward. But the size of the company wasn't in consideration. So like the biggest difference I can notice between, and it's Scopely is really interesting case study because the company itself, like it's a global company by now, they have permanent offices in Barcelona and they have the main offices in LA. So they're still learning how to be a global company because the LA office is like I think like 2 years old or something like that,
Okay.
or a 1 year old, like it's very new. So it's in this stage between transitioning between like small-ish, medium-sized company into global giant entity. So it's interesting to see the people's attitudes, and it's gonna be definitely interesting to see the attitude shift and the culture shift over time.
So it's interesting there that you said that you wanted stability. Yeah. Now, I've said a lot of times that there's no such thing as stability in any kind of job, whether it's permanent, whether you're a big company, you're a small company. I mean, look, I've spoken directly to people who've worked at big companies like Rockstar, for example. You know people who've worked at these companies, and they've just been sacked off at the end of a project. And it happens in the games industry more than any other industry.
Definitely. Game dev has extreme high turnout. Like going by statistics, if you're working more than 3 years in a company, you're an anomaly. If you're working more than 2 years in one company, you're probably gonna lose your job in a year. Simply because game development, like it's issue of organization, because there is single person is never needed throughout the entire scope of a project, because first you have the design phase, prototype phase, then development phase plus iteration and tests, and it's all sort of all together. Like the circle of development is sort of mangled in that phase, and then you have the release, and then you have ongoing maintenance / developing expansions and stuff like that, and you don't have a job title that's present throughout all of them. Maybe like a project manager or something, or creative director, like the very few people at the very top. But other than that, like game designers have most of their work at the start and then like mid to end. Because like in the mid start, it's like when you start developing the prototype, and like the game designer doesn't really have much to do because you have to build the fucking game to test it, and that's the reason for so like that could be mitigated by having multiple projects and like doing it in waves, so like slightly phase shifted type of deal.
Well, yeah, we're getting into the agile versus waterfall type stuff here. Again, it doesn't. I mean, I don't know if you have those kind of processes in any of the companies that you've worked for, but you have mentioned again that bigger companies have much more controlled processes, much more and smaller companies there's more risk, yes, and there's more kind of you're involved in a lot more.
Yeah, like for example in Scopely, if I want to propose a new feature, like a new tool for artists or something, at my previous job, I could just like, whenever I have time at work, when I'm waiting for something, I could just like nip on it. Here, I have to make official proposal, like, send it to like, hey, here is the thing I want to develop. Here is the issue that it's solving. Here are the potential benefits. Here is how long approximately it's going to take me. Here is what I think is the priority of this thing.
And now every company is different. Again, I'm working for a really big conglomerate at the moment, and they have I'm in to do work that is previous to anyone actually doing work. So I'm looking at things and I'm prototyping and researching and developing ideas and developing potential solutions that might or might not get signed off. So it's, again, a small company would not have time for that. They wouldn't. I mean, you're lucky if you've got time for that. Even startups that have got investment, all of their production time is going into getting as much done as they possibly can in the shortest amount of time, and do it. It's always a rush. Yeah, in a way that in a software development company, often you're doing it in a way that is still maintainable going forward. You're still putting your design patterns in place, and you're still putting in most of your maintenance, the documentation and that kind of thing. But there is a lot of stuff that's skipped as well.
I'd say documentation does suffer at smaller companies.
Yes and no. I mean, it really does depend. Again, I'm talking from a software side of things, not necessarily a games thing, because you don't, with a game, what are you documenting?
Oh, you definitely do, man. Mate, like, okay, so this is probably NDA, so I'm gonna be very vague about it.
Yep.
when you make a game in Unity, Unity gives you bunch of systems already developed, like animation system or a camera, rudimentary movement system, physics engine, so you don't have to write them from scratch. One of those systems in the game I'm currently working on is basically replaced by our custom thing. So I have to, there is no other documentation than internal documentation about that thing. And it's mostly good, but could be better. If I compare it to official Unity documentation, it's
So there's a core system with the system or the piece of software that I'm currently proposing for. I'm proposing new solutions that are going to sit in the middle of the architecture at the moment. Again, I can't talk about it in too much detail, hence NDAs, etc. But there is a core system that sits underneath all of this that's been written many years ago and isn't very well documented. There are a few diagrams here and there. They've got a Confluence set up where people are documenting as they go. They've got various bits and pieces in lots of different places, but not one person knows how everything works. And that people are coming and going all the time, so they're losing information that they needed. However, part of a developer's job, part of somebody who's coming in to write a new piece of code or a new feature for a piece of software, is to be able to understand that software and be able to read it and figure out what it's doing, why it's doing it in a certain way. Again, that's part of what I'm doing. I haven't actually had much time at all with the developers, but I need to at least, I'm experienced enough to look at the source code and go, right, I see what they're doing there. And if I needed to write anything, I would be able to kind of get my hands dirty in it. Now, this is again where process comes in. With the bigger companies, a lot of the time, more time is put into things like onboarding and getting somebody up to speed with how they do things and how their processes work in order to keep it maintainable, keep these absolutely huge pieces of software, these huge technical estates in line, so when we get to a point down the line where we need to get in 50 new contractors because we've just won a $3 billion contract that needs implementing by the end of next year, that they can just go, right, here you go, we'll set up 4 teams, there's some team leads, these are the general this is the general process of how we would write a new feature, or how we would write a new service, or how we would write a new, I don't know, physics engine if you're in the games industry, if that even is a thing. I think these days it's usually third-party stuff, as you said. But that's why, that's a big difference between small and big for me. Yeah. Small, I have total and utter control over the autonomy over the decisions I'm going to make and what frameworks I'm going to use. And for one client, I might use Ninject as my dependency container. Another one, I might use, I don't know, the built-in .NET Core stuff. Again, I'm coming from a very different world to you, but
So the thing that I've noticed, I had 2 weeks working for Scopely, and I've started seeing the pattern, and I started seeing the reasoning and the reasoning behind all those processes. And it seems to be the biggest difference between bigger and smaller companies is the emphasis on systems, but it is because of their size, because they have so many people. They optimize the the communication. They put so many restrictions, well, not restrictions, but guidelines on your communication. So feature proposals, code reviews, pull requests, everything is very formulaic, so that it can be easier managed. Because, in small company you have 5-10 people, in a bigger company you have 100. So, your manager can, let's say, there is difference between being sort of no main manager, just one main decision maker, and everyone sort of knows what they're doing, of 5-man team, and 30 people team where suddenly there is merge issues that you have to avoid. There is all kinds of issues that you have to avoid. So you have to slow down things a bit to make sure that they are no one stepping on each other's toes, and B, all of it is sort of self-documenting almost, so that, like, even if you don't have the proper documentation, you can go back in the communication logs and find the relevant piece of information, which will be harder, but when it's like mission critical and, everything's on fire and you really fucking need it, you're gonna have it.
Yeah.
Whereas...
something really interesting you said there is where there's not one single person who's making all the decisions. Now, there is a hierarchy. The bigger the company, the more of a I don't care how these huge companies that say they've got a flat hierarchy, it's just rubbish. I don't care who you are, what you're working for. There is a hierarchy in your company. There is, for example, a team of system engineers where I work, a team of solution architects that design all of the software and put all of the one person might be working on one particular customer vendor relationship, and they might be working on a particular interface that needs implementing and working through the data and figuring out how all the fields fit together and how they're going to be displayed on the screen. And then there might be somebody else who's working on, like myself, who might be working on future interfaces and future layers that need to be added into an architecture. But there's always somebody above them that has to review and sign things off in a bigger company. And this is where, as an independent software consultant, I used to butt heads a little bit. I used to have a problem with that because I felt like it was control, and I felt like it was direction, and I felt like it was people telling me how to do my job. But when I think about it, it's really not. It's really not. It's a process that is required in order for my client to be able to maintain their software going forward. So I have now backed down. I'm not an awkward bastard anymore like I used to be. I don't have this instant reaction of like gut reaction of, oh God, I don't want to get involved with that. I don't want to get embroiled in that process. But I totally understand why them processes exist. And yes, the bigger the company, the more processes involved, the more bureaucracy, the more forms have to be signed, the more intranets and single sign-ons you have to go through to actually get to a point where you can. The more timesheets you have to fill in for different departments, we have different cost centers, and it's crazy, but it's something I accept these days.
Yeah. And it's unfortunately necessary. Like a company might and should try to curb down the bureaucracy as much as it can, because it is beyond certain point almost definitely. Well, it's always a time cost, and beyond certain point it becomes a time waste, which costs you money as a company. So you definitely would like to avoid it. But unfortunately, it is necessary simply because of the size. Like you cannot. Meaningfully organized group of people larger than, let's say, 4 without any sort of processes for communication.
No, you're right. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't sure how you're going to end that, but you're right. If the smaller the group, the easier it is to manage, because it depends on the individuals in the group as well. I've worked in teams of 4 where all 4 people have been seniors and all 4 people think that they know exactly what they're doing, including myself. Think that their way is best, and this is where the politics comes into it, and this is why we have line managers and people who are in place specifically to manage people and manage their egos. It happens even in every industry. Yeah.
Chris, can I just take like a 30 seconds to shout out to every single project manager that's out there, even if you're doing a bad job? God bless that you're there. Because, there are some bad project managers, but the ones that I had over the 6 years and the few that I was worked with, every single one of them was amazing and made my life easier. And whenever there was no project manager, I could see the project just.
Yeah, there's different levels, and I wasn't laughing because I don't believe in project management or anything like that. I'm a strong believer in people having specific. Roles in a particular project. There
can be some very detrimental project managers. I realize that.
But there can be poisonous people in any part of an organization. If you've got your DevOps manager, right, has got a bee in the bonnet about the way that somebody's put some software together because it doesn't fit exactly in with their system, but this is a new piece of software that's got new processes around it and there's new business reasons for it. If they've got a bee in the bonnet because it doesn't fit with what they've done because they have to do more work, then they're essentially poisonous if they don't get over that and work with the person who's written the software or with the team that's put this software together in order to get it to a point where you can both work together. You know, that's what it's all about. It's getting to a point. Now, if you're being obtuse or obnoxious, you know, it doesn't help anybody, and it just stresses you out as well.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer though in project managers. I've worked with some hideous ones, people who couldn't organise their arse from their elbow, the people who literally just sit on things and don't do anything with it. You know, they don't support the people that they manage, they're project managing, or project managers who try to manage people. They've not been managing the project, which is what they're there for. And the same applies. We talked about having support people as well. A lot of developers look down at support. A lot of developers kind of, you know, snub their nose at them because they're doing a job that a lot of they look right. Okay, I'll just say they look down at them essentially because they don't do the same job as them. They don't realise that a support person is there to help you get on with your feature, to help you get on with your day job, and they are. If I get a good support person who comes over and bothers me all the time, right? Bothers me, you know, in inverted commas. They're not bothering me. They're doing their job in order for me to not have to do their job as well as my job, you know?
Yep.
And that is invaluable. The same goes for anybody in a team that's doing their part of the team. And that's another interesting comparison between small and big. We've already kind of touched on it, but
and that's a huge. I would say like that's a huge advantage of big companies. Just the sheer amount of people and the expertise, because I mean it obviously depends on the company culture and attitude, but you know here I'm blessed with really amazing people that I'm working with. Everyone is extremely helpful, extremely willing to share their share their expertise and take the time out, take their valuable time out of their assigned tasks and come over and sometimes like sit with me even for half an hour and like explaining me certain system or like letting me know how to find certain things. Because you know when you come to the project that's in development for some years, you're gonna have a easy curve like that. It's not really like the curve can be different, but it's always gonna take you some time before you familiarize yourself with everything. If you can ever do that.
And I have the same as well. When I'm onboarded with any company, whether it's small or big, I really value any time that I get off anybody, because a lot of the time these projects are under a hell of a lot of pressure, and I've been brought in to relieve some of that pressure for whatever reason. And if somebody who's working on a production side of things, or they're working, you know, on something that needs to be delivered next week, if they give me an hour of the time to draw a diagram and explain something to me, I'm very thankful, you know, and I try and make it clear that I'm thankful as well. Tultepe says, having worked with several projects last year where project management have been nothing more than title. Now that does happen. Project managers aren't, again, not always, but the same applies to everybody.
Yeah.
But you tar people. It's that them versus us thing that we again, you weren't here, Patryk, but we had Dan, Josie's husband, on a few weeks ago, and the topic was them versus us. And it was quite interesting because both Dan and I, Josie maybe not so much, but both Dan and I have been in positions in the past where we very much had a them versus us attitude. When I was younger, I did. People feel like they're just there to be awkward, feel like they're not helping anything, you know, and then it kind of breeds this environment where you're not helping each other. And the bigger the company, the more chance of that kind of thing happening, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like as with any group of people, there are gonna be some assholes, and the more people you have, the more assholes you're gonna have.
Yeah.
It's maths. It's maths.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, again, it depends on the kind of the cultural environment as well. And again, the bigger the company, the more difficult it is to control that environment too.
Yeah.
Because you could quite easily, there's someone like me working in the way that I'm working in this company, I've got complete control over where I do the work. I could go into the office and spend a month in the office and nobody would tell me off. I've been at home for 3 weeks and nobody's told me off. But there's a mutual respect there for the fact that I know what I'm doing in my job, and I've done it for a long time, and you know I'm delivering things. Hopefully, anyway, you know, hopefully they haven't got a festering worry in the back of their heads, and they're going to have a word with me at some point. But you know, there's always that thing when you're a remote worker, whether or not people are happy with what you're doing. But again, kind of digressing a little bit. I think What do you prefer? I mean, I know you've only done it for 2 weeks so far, but do you prefer the smaller company mentality, the chaos, the organised chaos, or do you prefer this more structured, kind of regimented process?
I'd say I would like. I'd say, well, okay, if it's working, then definitely the structure process of bigger companies. When it's dysfunctional, it's like on the bottom of my list. So it's hardly reliant on the company culture. Because I could see, like, I'm always in that weird spot where, like, I don't like to lead, but if I have to, I will. And if person who's leading, like, if my leader, my superior is not performing according to my expectations, I will try to step up and perform the role.
So you would override them rather than go and have a word with their manager.
I mean, I would have a word, like, in the polite way. Like, you know, I won't be just like, yeah, you fuck off. More like, you know, let's talk about this, let's do this. And, you know, if, like, I had at one of the companies, I had this issue where my superior was very, in my opinion, was a very indecisive person. In their opinion, they were very careful and considerate. On the other hand, in my opinion, I was a very decisive person, and it didn't took me long to arrive to decision, to list all the pros and cons, and then basically pick the hopefully better option. In their opinion, I was rash. So this is this is a typical clash of mentalities, of approaches.
Yep.
But I would just start doing what I was supposed to be doing and like what I thought was the best before just like letting them know. And I would say, well, oh, by the way, there is like, here is this done and that done. Because I was just frustrated. Like my typical example is like, we had a meeting on how to implement a certain feature. There are 2 ways to do it. Each would take me approximately 10 minutes to implement. We're talking about this for half an hour. So I could implement the feature twice in 2 different ways and like literally measure the performance in shorter amount of time that it took me to talk with him. So like this is the thing that was really infuriating me, and I was very hard pushing against it. But if I have a capable leader, I have like no problem following.
So that's an interesting point as well. That you are. Again, we can compare the small company versus the big company in that in a small company, you don't really have the luxury of delegating, and you don't really have the luxury of having a leader, or a strong leader necessarily. You might have someone who runs the studio or runs the company, but that's it. You know, they essentially go, if they're any kind of leader, they essentially go, right, Patryk, this is what we're doing. What can you do? Please help us with everything, you know?
Here is what we're trying to achieve.
Yep.
You have your expertise. Do this to the best of what we can manage with our resources.
Yep.
And be it the development time and the frame rate or whatever, the specs of the hardware that we're trying to target, you know, yada, 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 yada.
Yeah. And I had a similar experience from my very first job in that I was taken on as a developer. And I essentially ended up running, I've said this almost every podcast recently, but I ended up running the IT department, the telesales department, and the hardware and the software and the graphic design as well. I was in charge of everybody essentially because I was the first person there, I suppose, or I was the last person left of the first group of people that were there, you know? So it kind of naturally fell on me, but nobody stepped in to do anything about it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and it's a shame. So like the other difference between smaller and bigger companies, in smaller company I had to do everything literally myself. I was the highest authority on technical art, and you know, if I wanted to make a certain, or like if I wanted to upscale an image, it was probably an image that I created. So you know, I had to literally make everything from scratch that I needed. Here I am just a technical artist. I am not a 2D artist, I am not an animator, I am neither of any of like multitude of other things that I had to do. And it kind of feels nice to say like, okay, here is the thing that I'm supposed to do, and it's done. Hey Pablo, you're a better artist than me, you're faster than me. Can you like do this, and this for me?
You haven't found that hard to adjust to then, from being totally in control, well, almost totally in control of any aspect, you know, that you needed to turn to being essentially in charge of one aspect of a particular project or multiple projects, maybe?
Yeah, no, because I did Elysian Shadows before, and before Elysian Shadows went full time for me, I was back when we were like purely hobby project before Kickstarter. I was the lead artist, and I was managing for other artists. So I already had to manage people and delegate to people. Where like here I'm not managing people. I'm more like asking them instead of telling them what to do. But it's the same mentality. Like back then, I had to accept that I will never have 100% control over all of the art in Elysian Shadows because other people are doing it. I can do only just my art review and adjustments, and that's it. So yeah, it was no big deal for me. Like I found it kind of. Sorry, I find it kind of creepy how easily I got into the project and assimilated, and there's like no problem whatsoever.
You come across to me as someone who likes to kind of you will, as you said, you will take control if you need to, but you mostly like to be told what to do. You like it when you've got a set of constraints.
I don't like being told what to do. I like when it's like, hey, here we want to, like, I don't mind it. It's more like I don't mind it.
Right.
I don't. I like it when I'm not sure what should be better. So, like, I'm for example, right now I'm working with some really amazing graphic designers, like the titans of industry in terms of how to make a button feel appealing and make player want to click it.
Yeah.
And that might seem fascist, but there is so much psychology and math into it.
Marketing and user experience. Yeah. Honestly, I learned a hell of a lot about that over the years.
I can make nice and shiny button, but if I have a person with 10 years of experience tell me exactly how to make the best motherfucking shining button in entire goddamn fucking universe, you bet your ass I'm gonna listen to them. And I will enjoy it because I will be learning a lot of new things.
That's it. So, you've hit the nail on the head there. That's, again, the benefit for me for working and not necessarily being in charge, for working with bigger companies. I've got a broader spread of people that I can assimilate information from. I can take it all in and absorb it all. And I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And in fact, when I started this current project, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. You weren't around for the Dunning-Kruger curve thing. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger?
I wasn't, but I've heard of it. And also Ballmer's Peak, I know all of those.
So I've very recently hit that. I know you realise today that I have been, over the last couple of weeks, speaking to people at the top of Mount Stupid because I knew nothing, and it was a lot quicker learning process. I'm now going up the Valley of Despair or whatever it's called, but it's a much quicker process, whereas the first 10 years of my career probably were one entire curve, where now that curve is reduced down into, oh God, a week ago I asked a question. Now I know what I know. Yeah. Oh God, I must have looked like a complete idiot asking that. And I can. There's so many examples just in the last few weeks of exactly that, because I'm learning about an entirely new space that I had no idea. It's not even just an industry; it's a particular. It's in this instance, it's IoT, the Internet of Things.
It's a life thing.
New.
Yeah. And like that's so that's something that I alluded to before in the show, and it's probably the biggest contributor to why I'm so happy in Scopely. For the first time possibly in my life, I am not the best around in my field of expertise. So whenever I joined the project, I was the best artist. I knew I wasn't the best in the world because I have eyes. I've learned from a lot of people online. That's how I learned my craft. But I was always the best artist or the best programmer or the best whatever because I was only one of that role and I had no one to learn from directly on daily basis.
Yeah.
Here I have bunch of talented, and especially because I am technical artist and I'm only technical artist in Barcelona, but I have bunch of really cool people in LA who are answering my stupid questions. But I have here artists which are better than me and programmers which are better than me. So I have two of those primary components. For crying out loud, one of the artists, she's releasing her own comics. And they're pretty fucking good.
Cool.
She's really good artist. And it was dream of mine always to make a comic, but I was never good enough. For fuck's sake, I'm still not good enough at it. So it's there are seriously impressive people, and not being you have no idea how good it feels not being the smartest person in the room. Well, smartest in quote, I mean like the best in the field.
It's nice to hear that, to be fair, because a lot of people who make that move from a small environment where they've got all the control and the full autonomy, and they move into an environment where they are now a small fish in a big pond, they struggle quite a lot. And I know I did when I did it when I was a kid, because I moved from having all of this responsibility in my very first real job into corporate environments where, I mean, these were in fact, my very first job was a similar-ish job to what I'm doing now, but it was development. It wasn't the architecture side, and it was for a massive infrastructure company doing a contract for the Ministry of Defence in the UK, and all it was asset management. But I was surrounded by people who everybody knew more than me, everybody, and I was like, I didn't really know how to handle it back then, but I was very young as well, so.
Yeah, like there is one crucial life skill that, as far as I'm concerned, is not being taught and not even being spoken about, to the point where most people might not even realize it's a thing, which is called ego management. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of it, Chris?
Well, I mentioned egos earlier. It's very important to manage egos.
Ego management is being conscious of your ego and being able to like either ramp up or tone it down. So, for example, when I'm on an interview and I'm trying to sell myself to the company, I'm ramping up my ego. Yeah. I'm fucking amazing. Look, I have like so much experience, like those amazing projects. Hey, some of them fail, but hey, it wasn't my fault. Plus, I got paid for it, so no problem whatsoever. You know, you sell yourself. But like right now, when I'm like, I have a question which I know is basic and stupid, but I'm stupid. I'm like, hey, look, can I ask you a question without losing literally the last shreds of respect that you have towards me? Like, obviously it's joking, but it's a good setup. And that's genuinely the attitude that I have. I'm like, I know I'm gonna look dumb, and I know that I'm gonna embarrass myself, but it's better to be embarrassed for like few minutes than being stupid forever.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, and I'm the same now. I used to have an ego that couldn't be quelled, but these days, all of my job is asking questions. I'd say 90% of what I do is learning from other people, learning from not necessarily learning about like technical things. Sometimes it's just learning about how a company does something, or how that person works, and how they need me to continue in order for me to get the best value or the best result for them, And again, you might have conflicting opinions or conflicting values, even between two people that you're reporting to or two people that you're doing work for. And it's really important to be able to adjust yourself and adjust your ego and your personality based on who you're talking to and how they need you to approach a particular problem. I've got one guy, for example, at the moment who's extremely technical. He's a high-level manager, so he doesn't get involved in the day-to-day, but he's extremely technical, and he's very focused on the technical detail from how things work on the ground, Mm-hmm. But he doesn't know how things are implemented by the team that are actually developing things. And then I've got somebody else on the other side of the fence who's very focused on product, very focused on cost, and the business drivers, and what he can do to convince the business to buy his ideas or buy our ideas or whatever. And it's different. You're juggling completely apples and oranges. It's very different. And that being able to manage your own ego is very important in that respect. Because sometimes I need to show myself off. Other times I need to, say, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that, or sorry, what does this acronym mean? Because I've never heard it before. I don't want to make, Or
like, sorry, I fucked up, and now the entire development branch is unusable.
Indeed. Well, we come into the end of the show. We were a little bit late coming on today, so we're going to do our RTFM, and then we're going to move on to the show close from now. Unless there's anything else you particularly want to say about small versus big, or any other experiences you've had that are different?
Nothing in particular. I think it's going to be a topic that's going to stick with us for a while, because Scopely, as I said, like Scopely currently has around like 300, 400 employees directly, and then indirectly through the third-party companies they own, it's like close to 800, maybe 1,000.
Yeah.
So it's a growing company, and it's going to be extremely interesting case study on how the company culture shifts. So like I cannot wait till my office gonna start looking more like The Office, the TV series.
Well, oh god, which one? The UK one or the US one?
I know the one where it's like the environment is more toxic.
Well, they're both as bad as each other. But the US one has a bit of a different driver after the second season. Yeah. So I mean, RTFM. I actually have one prepared this week, and I don't normally. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
And please do. Maybe you're gonna inspire me because I don't have anything prepared.
So our RTFM section for anyone who's watching, and hello, Ooh, 90. That's a new name we haven't seen in chat before, so thank you very much for commenting. You just said the art of juggling feedback as well, which is quite important. You know, it's not necessarily just your ego, it's also what people give back to you and how you can...
And how you can handle it.
Yeah, how you handle it. Because a lot of people can be very, reactive and I
think I mentioned it once already during one of our shows that part of my artistic education was like entire quarter of semester on how to take and receive feedback.
Yes.
How to receive and how to provide it. And I'm a firm believer that it should be part of Common Core, and it should be especially part of education of anyone who wants to be creative in any way, shape, or form. And for those who don't know, I count programmers as creatives.
I think I do these days as well. I mean, I'd never really consider myself a particularly creative person, but when I think about how people who are non-technical or non-creative look at me, they kind of group me in the same category as a designer or even a PR guy. A lot of PR guys are misunderstood. They don't understand kind of what they do. The marketing, that's a creative industry in some respects. In lots of respects, yeah. Anyway, so yes, to those of you who are new, our RTFM section is where we have a little bit of a rant about something that's happened this week or something that in the industry that's occurred. This week, I'd like to have a rant, and I may even have had a rant about these before, about acronyms. But specifically acronyms that are so specific and so... that is an acronym that exists in the industry for something, but it's specific for a particular project, for a particular implementation, and developers specifically who are or project managers or whoever is involved in that, who continually use this acronym, and when you ask them to describe what it is and tell us what it is, sometimes they won't tell you, sometimes they'll just skip over that detail. I've had it quite a few times recently because the industry that I'm working at the moment is absolutely rammed with acronyms, but most of the time it's industry ones that I can look up and I can figure out. But there are so many project-specific ones. Just today I've had 3 that have popped up that I've never seen before. I've been working on this project I'm speaking to these people for 4 weeks now, and they just suddenly pop these 3 new ones at me, and I'm like, what? And I still haven't got an explanation as to what they are.
Okay, so Chris, I'm gonna give you an acronym that you may know. I didn't know and I had to ask, but I know it's not a project specific, but it's a very fucking niche thing. So, yeah. MVVN.
MVVN.
MVVN or M, I don't remember.
So that's Model View Model.
Fuck, you knew it!
Because that's...
I didn't.
MVC is Model View Controller, which is a pattern that we use in software development. It is general pattern of software development, and I totally did not knew it existed, and I was totally confused. MVVM is just kind of a evolution of MVC in a way, but it's used mostly for for desktop applications and things like that.
Okay, so here's the real question: like, how is it different from just like having listeners and events?
Well, I'm not an MVVM guy, so I can talk about MVC all day, but MVVM is something I don't really touch upon.
All right, maybe I'm gonna slowly start inviting people from the company to join in on the podcast. Maybe we can get the guy who designed the entire system for the current game on.
Go for it,
and I can ask him all kinds of stupid questions.
Yeah, I can't even do a comparison because I don't work with it that much, but there is events involved, and there is view models and.
As far as my ignorant self can say, it's like there is literally the same as just like events and listeners. But it has to be different because it's named differently.
Yeah, I mean the models in a particular domain are usually objects that contain information about
data structures,
a page or a view of some description or something. I mean, in games, it would probably be. I don't know. I'm struggling at how to apply MVVM to games. But
you can think about it in terms of like UI and stuff.
2D games, yeah, UI, definitely. Because MVVM is used in WPF, which is a Microsoft evolution of Windows Forms. So it's used quite heavily in that, and it's all about returning events or controlling events and subscribing to those events. But to me, the observer pattern works better for that. But anyway, we're not going to go into that. We're not talking about design patterns this time.
Yeah,
Do you have an RTFM?
I guess that was my RTFM, a little bit of nerdy talk, because
Okay.
I'm not. I gotta say, like, since I moved here to Barcelona, I haven't really been angry. I don't have anything to be angry about. I am throwfully. I still can't pronounce this fucking word, but I really like it. Throwfully, like completely, but nicer. Thoroughly. Yeah, this one.
Thoroughly.
I will someday learn how to pronounce this word, but maybe not today. I would say that's it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Tultepe says, sounds like my company. Lots of awesome acronyms made up by salespeople. Is awesome the right word to use there?
Yeah, I think that was ironic. I think that was ironic awesome.
Yeah.
I think that was I'm screaming in pain and suffering awesome.
I mean, the thing is, some industries really require an acronym, you know, to simplify or to make it easy, especially when you're writing documentation. You know, as long as you've got a good glossary, and you know you've referenced it and you've explained what that acronym does, and not just what the acronym stands for, and then what it actually is, you know, and that applies to every document that you write, because a lot of people will be reading it in the context of, I've only got access to this one document. I don't have access to the 20 that you've written previously. And I know you're copying and pasting, and I know that you're repeating yourself over and over, but please give me some context when I'm reading something. Anyway, right. Or in an email most of the time, to be fair, these just popped in like, oh no, this actually is this in this industry. I was talking about a data structure today, actually, and I sent an email to somebody. I said to them, the specification that you sent me doesn't match the data structure I was sent. Can you elaborate, or can you give me a bit more information? And he said, that's I can't remember the acronym now, but that's the GEV spec. What I was talking about was the DEX spec. Oh, right, great.
Yeah, that explains everything.
Yeah,
now I know
I'm on board now.
Everything. It's no more questions from me.
Yes. Right, so that is the end of the show. Thank you very much for everybody who's watching, who's joined us in Twitch, and everyone who's joined in as well. So Tultepe, Evina, Oo90, we. Is that a bad spelling of we, as in French? We.
It's like
yes.
we, French we.
Gwynts is here as well. Gwynts, Josie's husband, and yes, nice to meet you as well. We or oo.
Yeah. Oh my God, if you are my project manager, fuck you, Thomas.
Yes, we do cover a lot of different subjects on Documentation Not Included. We cover game development. We talk about software development. We've been doing a lot of shows recently, more around processes and just the general kind of people side of development as well. And we usually do have another host as well, Josie, who's off today. So yes, please do come and join us again. What was I up to? I was reading a script and then I got distracted by someone chatting in chat. So you can. That's it. Anyway, it's your go, Patryk.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can come visit our website at www.dnistream.live, where you can find links to our Discord, Twitter, YouTube channel, like literally everything that we are as a podcast. You can use the website to contact us if you have any grievances or you hate us, or if you want to be a guest, which we highly invite, because without guests we tend to get pretty rambly, as you may have noticed this episode.
Oh, I don't know. I think we've done all right today.
I think we did a stellar job, but it's always better with a guest. So yeah, being the dev podcast, we have also the source code for our website, which the fabulous Chris created. and is still maintaining. It's available on github.com/documentation not included for anyone not interested. For anyone interested, sorry, I don't know where that not come from. That's totally on me. I mean, I don't mean I'm not interested. I'm falling apart. Sorry.
It's fine. Don't worry about it, Patryk.
It's
I know nobody enjoys development. It's fine.
Come on. I love development.
So yes, thank you to Patryk, our guest, for today.
Yeah.
So again, for anybody new, Patryk hasn't been around for a few weeks, but he is a host of the podcast.
Yeah,
And
for the longest time. It was like 2 months. 2 months, wasn't it?
It was, and it's very, very thankful to have you back, and especially with a new microphone as well, so he sounds a lot clearer than he did previously.
High fidelity.
And yes, hopefully we'll have Josie back again next week. She said, unfortunately, she fell sick just a few hours just before the show, so it's unfortunate. And thank you to the audience. Please come again next week, 7 o'clock, www.twitch.tv/DNI stream. Oh, and next week we also have, hopefully, we have a guest next week. It's a guy who, on Twitter, he calls himself a failed Dutch comedian and development speaker, and he's called Paul Verbeekmast. And we reached out to him a few weeks ago because we found his website. We were talking about GeoCities for anybody who used to be around in the 90s on the internet. GeoCities was it's infamous for having really awful websites with mouse trails and, you know, marquees and blink tags and really horrible flashing backgrounds. Anyway, go and check. Amazing. Well, this is a particularly amazing website. So if you go to his website, this is our guest for next week. It's www.paulvm.com. Check it out. The guy who put that website together is coming on the show next week.
Oh, my eyes!
Yes. So, and he's also got if he's still got it, he's got a wonderful mustache as well. So he'll be giving us a run for our money, Patryk.
It is beautiful.
So, thank you, everybody. It's a goodbye from Patryk.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Catch you later.
Bye-bye.